The metal
It's side
tags
squat,
clinked
side right,
as
that's right
James
back.
turned them over with trembling
You slide for the
fingers.
side fly.
Cold silver under moonlight, their engravings caught just enough light from his porch to send a chill down his spine. K-97-734, U.S. Army, Operation Silverback. Max sat a few feet away, still as a statue. The German shepherd's amber eyes were unblinking, unreadable. In those eyes, James saw the same haunted depth he faced in the mirror each morning something war had carved into both of them. Only a day ago he'd resolved to return the dog. Max had wrecked furniture, terrified the mailman howled through the nights. The neighbors had started whispering. "Some animals just can't be saved," one had muttered after Max lunged at a child. "But those tags changed everything," James whispered. "We're not going back to the shelter, are we, boy?" His voice cracked like dry wood. Max didn't move until his ears flicked, just barely acknowledging the voice. For the first time, the dog didn't turn away. Something unspoken passed between them. 6 years ago, James had worn a uniform with medals and brass that gleamed like promises. Now he lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of Millfield, Connecticut, surrounded by the silence he once craved, but now feared. The physical wounds, 3 bullets and a head trauma, had healed. The rest hadn't. At night he woke reaching for a weapon, no longer there. During the day, backfiring cars triggered patrol mode reflexes. Try a companion animal, Dr. Jenkins had suggested, sliding a pamphlet across her desk. Something that needs you as much as you need it. He'd laughed then. He couldn't even keep food in his fridge. But the idea had grown roots. 3 weeks later, he stood outside the beige county shelter, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He almost drove away. But inside, a woman named Martha met him with soft eyes and a quiet question. "Military." James nodded. She led him past barking kennels to a solitary cage at the end. The dog inside didn't bark, didn't move, just watched. "This is Max," she said. Max sat still in the far corner of his kennel, silent and unmoving. Unlike the other dogs that leapt and barked desperate for attention, he simply watched, alert, unreadable. His posture was not aggressive, but something about him felt coiled, like a soldier waiting for orders that would never come. James tilted his head. "This is the one you want me to meet." Martha nodded gently. "He's been here 3 weeks. Picked up near the interstate. No chip, no collar. Our vet thinks he may have military or police training, but there's no record. He's not aggressive," she added carefully, "but unpredictable. Doesn't let most people get close. Barely eats. Doesn't play." James stared at Max. Something about the dog's silent resignation, the way he sat with dignity, even in confinement, stirred something in him. "Can I go in?" "Maybe just sit near the kennel first," Martha advised. "Let him get used to you." James pulled up a chair. He sat. Didn't move. Didn't try to coax. Just existed beside Max. For an hour he talked softly about the weather, about his drive, about nothing. The dog never blinked. "Same time tomorrow?" Martha asked as he rose to leave. "Same time," he echoed. Day after day, James returned. He edged closer. Spoke more. By the 5th visit, Max had crept forward to the gate. On the 7th, James offered a treat. Max hesitated, then took it gently. "He likes you," Martha said, astonished. "That's more than we've seen from him." James didn't hesitate. "I'll take him." The adoption paperwork was more like a psychological evaluation than a formality. "He's going to need patience," Martha warned. "Special training. This won't be easy." James gave a grim smile. Nothing worth it ever is. The first night was chaos. Max wouldn't enter the house. James slept beside him on the porch swing. The second night, the dog made it inside but paced until dawn. By the end of the week, the mailman refused to deliver, neighbors complained, and James's couch was shredded. Max reacted to diesel trucks, helicopters, certain boots. He would cower, snap freeze. James recognized the pattern. It was more than fear. It was trauma. He has PTSD, James told Dr. Jenkins. Just like me. She didn't deny it. Instead, she asked, "Do you think he's too damaged?" James didn't answer. Not yet. But when Max lunged at a child, James made a decision. He would return the dog. And that's when he found the hidden tags. The tags had been hidden in a stitched pocket inside Max's collar, a place designed to be missed. James stared at them under the kitchen light, his hands trembling. These weren't standard ID tags. They were military-issued, stamped with an operation he knew all too well, Operation Silverback. His breath locked in his chest. He turned over the second tag. Handler ID code, Thompson. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Commander Richard Thompson. The man who had sent James's unit into a kill zone based on flawed intelligence. The man who denied air support. The man whose decisions left 6 of his men in body bags. James looked up. Max sat by the wall, silent, watching. A creature broken by the same man who had broken him. "We're in this together now, boy," James whispered. For the first time, Max walked across the room and gently rested his head on James's knee. It lasted only seconds, but it was everything. The next morning, James pulled out his laptop and dug into every scrap of info he could find. Operation Silverback, military working dog protocols, K9 units. Most documents were redacted, but he had an ace, Carlos Martinez, an old friend from the unit now working at the Pentagon. They hadn't spoken in years. "Martinez," James said when the man picked up, "I need a favor." There was a long pause. "Wilson, Jesus, man. I thought you were gone," James explained carefully. "The dog, the tags, the connection." Martinez went quiet. "Give me a few days," he said. "I'll look into it. And it's good to hear your voice again." While waiting, James began observing Max like a soldier tracking patterns. He kept a log, what triggered him, what calmed him, what made him aggressive. The patterns were distinct. Helicopter blades, diesel engines, men in boots, doors closing behind him. Noises didn't startle Max, specific memories did. This was no ordinary dog. Max hadn't just been trained. He'd been conditioned and damaged. 3 days later, Martinez emailed him encrypted documents. Subject line, "You were right." James opened the files with shaking hands. The first document was a service record. Dog ID K97734. Codename Maximus Breed. German Shepherd, role, detection and patrol. U.S. Army origin. Trained in Germany, acquired by the U.S. at 18 months. Max had served 3 combat tours. He'd detected explosives, saved lives, survived firefights. Commendations followed his name. But then came the most chilling part. Final Handler, Commander Richard Thompson. James froze. Martinez had attached further records documents about a Black Ops project, Enhanced K9 Tactical Response. Thompson had spearheaded it. The program's goal: create the ultimate war dog, immune to chaos, pain, hesitation. But the training methods were monstrous. Sleep deprivation, food restriction, aggression conditioning, exposure to violent stimuli. Dogs were punished until they stopped reacting to fear. "This is torture," James muttered. The records listed 7 dogs deemed combat ineffective. 6 were euthanized. The 7th, Max, vanished from records. Then James saw the final entry dog, matching Max's description, found near Interstate Connecticut 3 months ago. James inhaled sharply. 3 months ago was when he'd been discharged from the VA hospital in Hartford after his last episode. Max hadn't just ended up in Connecticut. He'd escaped. Somehow, against impossible odds, They'd both resurfaced in the same place at the same time. Two broken soldiers, both survivors of Thompson. There was more. Martinez called again. He's living in Danbury now, less than an hour from you, working for a private military contractor. Full pension, full honors. James clenched the phone, his voice low and hard. He doesn't get Max back, Wilson Martinez said carefully. Don't do anything reckless. The man still has connections. James didn't reply. He stared across the room. Max was lying in sunlight watching. He looked calm, but James knew better. They were both watching the same ghosts. He bent down, rubbing the dog's fur. We're not done yet, are we? Max's ears flicked forward. James searched online for anyone who might understand what Max had been through. That's when he found Dr. Sarah Montgomery, a veterinary behaviorist specializing in trauma rehabilitation. Her clinic was a 30-minute drive away. Their first phone call was cautious. James mentioned anxiety, fear triggers, aggression, left out the military details. I'm not sure I can help, Sarah admitted, but I'd like to try. Bring him in early tomorrow before normal hours. It'll be quieter. The next morning, Max trembled in the back seat as they drove. James whispered calm reassurances, offering treats he barely touched. When they arrived, Max refused to get out. Sarah didn't rush them. She stood at a respectful distance, speaking softly. Let him choose. We've got time. 20 minutes later, Max stepped out onto the gravel, every muscle taut, but moving. Sarah didn't praise him loudly. Just a gentle, very brave boy. Inside the exam room was stripped down. No tables, no glaring lights. Just blankets, a corner for retreat, a human on the floor, instead of a pedestal. I've worked with military dogs before, she said. Their training's deep. But trauma breaks the patterns. They get confused, hypervigilant. Their wiring scrambles. James watched as Max sniffed the walls, staying close to exits. Every sudden movement made him flinch, but he didn't bolt. He stayed. Sarah continued. The good news. Dogs live in the present. With consistent safety, we can overwrite fear. But it takes time. Can you tell what happened to him? She paused, watching Max's responses. Some of his behaviors suggest standard training, how he surveys the room, checks exits. But the flinching, the way he won't let his back face us. Someone hurt him. Repeatedly. Systematically. James felt his jaw clench. After an hour of gentle testing and note-taking, Sarah said, he'll need desensitization, therapy, confidence-building work, and a routine he can count on. It won't be fast or easy. James nodded. I'm not looking for easy. She studied him for a beat. Why this dog? James looked at Max. Because we're the same. Broken in familiar ways. Sarah didn't ask more. Instead, she handed him a plan and a card. This colleague works with veterans using animal partnerships. Might help both of you. James pocketed it without a word. Over the following weeks, James and Max fell into a rhythm. Each morning began with a strict routine meals at the same time leash, training slow walks around the property. In the afternoons, they tackled desensitization. Max was exposed in tiny doses to sounds that once sent him spiraling. Helicopter audio, diesel trucks on a nearby road, controlled, repeatable, safe. Evenings were quiet. James read aloud memoirs, novels, anything with a calm cadence. Sarah had suggested it to help Max associate voices with peace, not orders. Twice a week, they visited her clinic. Max grew more comfortable, first in the car, then in the room, then remarkably with Sarah. He made eye contact before reacting, she noted during their third week. He's learning to trust your judgment instead of defaulting to fear. James didn't say it, but he noticed it too. Max now slept at the foot of his bed, no longer curled in some corner, like he expected attack. James himself was sleeping better, nightmares fading. Still, not everything was smooth. Word of Max's earlier behavior had spread. Margaret Whitaker, the neighbor he'd once lunged at, began collecting signatures for a petition. Soon Officer Cooper was at the door, clipboard in hand. "People are concerned," he said. "Summer's coming. Kids are out of school." "He's never unsupervised," James replied. "Never off-leash. Just be careful," Cooper said, glancing at Max, who sat behind the screen door, watching, calm but alert. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. Billy Johnson, James's young neighbor with autism, appeared at the edge of the property, eyes fixed on Max. The boy didn't speak, didn't flinch, and Max didn't react with fear, just sat watching quietly. James approached slowly. "Billy, would you like to meet Max?" he asked, casting a glance toward Billy's mother, Lisa, who hovered anxiously nearby. To everyone's surprise, Max stayed calm. He didn't flinch, didn't retreat. He simply watched the boy with a quiet intensity that mirrored Billy's. That first meeting turned into a weekly ritual. Billy sat in the yard, silent still, while Max gradually crept closer. By the third visit, Max allowed Billy to pet him. By the fifth, the boy had begun to speak quiet, stilted words, but words nonetheless. Lisa was stunned. "He hasn't talked this much in months. Something about your dog connects." The neighborhood began to shift. The dangerous dog label softened. People waved again. Margaret Whitaker, once ready to call animal control, now brought biscuits for Max. But just as healing began to take root, shadows returned. James got a call from Martinez. "Thompson's making inquiries, official ones." He filed paperwork with the DOD claiming a military working dog was stolen. James's stomach turned. He's coming for Max, most likely. He knows the dog's in Connecticut. It's just a matter of time. The next day, Sarah found James sitting in silence, staring out the window. "Bad news?" she asked. "Complicated news." He hadn't told her about the tumor yet. That could wait. Right now, the danger was external and real. Then Thompson arrived. At Dr. Miller's office, while James was there for a medical consult, the receptionist interrupted. "There's a Colonel Thompson here. Says it's urgent. Property recovery." James's pulse quickened. He walked into the waiting room. Thompson stood, tall, silver hair, and cold eyes. "Staff Sergeant Wilson," he said coolly. "You're in possession of federal military property. That dog belongs to the U.S. government." "He's not property," James said quietly. "He's a soul you broke." "I have a court order," Thompson replied, pulling out an official-looking document. "You have 24 hours to surrender the animal. After that, you'll be charged with obstruction." James took the paper. His hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Sarah entered moments later. She took one look at the paper in James's hand and the rigid posture of the stranger beside him. "Is everything okay?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Thompson turned to her smoothly. "Dr. Montgomery, I'm the original handler of the dog in question. He needs specialized containment. I'm here to oversee his safe transfer." Sarah didn't flinch. Funny. Because Max flinches when he hears male voices like yours. He doesn't do that with people he trusts. For the first time, Thompson's expression cracked, just a flicker. "This is legal protocol. The animal is government property developed through a classified program. His name is Max Sarah," said firmly. "And in this environment, he's making progress. That matters." Thompson nodded toward the paper. "I suggest you both comply, or things will become complicated." After he left, James explained everything to Sarah Thompson's history, the experiments, the trauma. She was furious. "He can't take Max. I have a friend who specializes in animal rights law. We'll fight this." But James wasn't optimistic. He has power. He's protected. You saw the document. Still, when he got home, something unexpected awaited. Margaret Whitaker, Lisa Johnson, Officer Cooper. A small crowd of neighbors stood on his porch. "We heard about the court order," Margaret said. "You're not alone in this." Others nodded. Some offered to speak to reporters. Others would sign affidavits attesting to Max's transformation. James's throat tightened. He had spent years avoiding connection, and now the community was showing up for him. Sarah returned with her lawyer friend, Andrea Dawson. Andrea reviewed the court order and nodded. "We can file an emergency injunction. We'll cite the Animal Welfare Act, Max's current therapeutic use, and documented trauma under government custody." But they all knew it might not be enough. James looked down at Max, who sat by Billy's feet as the boy quietly read aloud. "He can't have him," James whispered. "Not again." That night they organized. Legal paperwork, news contacts, community volunteers to film the seizure if it came. James, meanwhile, fought off waves of nausea and pain as the tumor pressed harder inside his skull. But he wouldn't show it. Not yet. James stood in the bathroom, gripping the sink face, pale and slick with sweat. He hadn't told anyone, not Sarah, not Martinez, not even Max. The tumor was real, malignant, growing. Dr. Miller had explained everything: complex location, near the temporal lobe, invasive surgery, radiation, chemo, maybe a year, maybe less. And if it progressed, speech loss, seizures, memory breakdown. But none of that terrified him like the thought of Max going back into Thompson's hands. Sarah had seen something in his face. "You need to rest," she'd urged, gently touching his arm after he'd vomited for the second time that evening. "I'm fine," he lied, the same way soldiers always do. Outside, neighbors stood guard. Some had lawn chairs, others paced with coffee mugs and quiet purpose. A few carried signs: "Therapy, not torture." "Max deserves peace." Channel 8 News had confirmed coverage. Andrea was prepping the appeal filing. In the yard, Billy read softly to Max under a porch light, oblivious to the legal storm swirling around them. James sat beside them, one hand on Max's back. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "you already won. You survived him. You're healing others." Max leaned into him. And in that moment, despite the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, James felt peace. Not in the future, not in justice, but in this: a boy, a dog, a wounded man, and a porch filled with stars. He had no illusions. Thompson would come with force if necessary. The court might side with power. Time might run out. But for now, they were not alone. And that had to be enough. Dawn broke sharp, and golden sunlight slicing through the tension that had settled over Millfield like fog. James hadn't slept. Neither had Max. They lay side by side for most of the night, silent, still listening for tires on gravel. The neighborhood patrol was already in place. Sarah arrived just before 7 a.m., her lawyer friend, Andrea, in tow, carrying a thick file of affidavits, photos, behavioral evaluations, and therapy notes. "Everything's ready," Andrea said. "We'll file the injunction the second the courthouse opens." James didn't speak. He simply nodded. Then headlights. Two unmarked vehicles rolled up the road. A government van, dark blue, followed by a black SUV. Thompson stepped out. His suit pressed his expression unreadable. With him, two uniformed officers and an animal control handler. But they didn't expect the crowd. Over 30 people stood across the lawn and driveway. Parents, veterans, children, reporters. Cameras pointed, phones raised. Andrea stepped forward. "This is an active injunction filing. Any seizure attempt before judicial review may violate the Animal Welfare Act." Thompson's jaw tensed. "I'm operating under federal order." "And we're operating under public witness," Sarah cut in. "Try it. Just try it." Max stood beside James without command. His body tense, protective, but calm. No growl, no panic. Billy walked up beside them, holding Max's leash loosely. The image froze everyone. A troubled boy and a once violent dog, standing still under a soft morning sky. "This is who you're taking him from." James said, voice gravelly but clear. "Not me, him." For the first time, Thompson didn't speak. He turned away and left. The silence after Thompson's retreat felt louder than any bark. James stood frozen, Max still pressed against his leg, Billy at his side gripping the leash like a lifeline. The neighbors exhaled almost in unison. Some cheered, others cried. Cameras caught everything. The Image Boy Dog veteran was already being uploaded, shared broadcast. Sarah hugged James tightly, whispering, "You did it. We all did." But James shook his head. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, the legal battle played out quietly behind the scenes. Andrea pushed for full civilian guardianship, citing both the therapeutic value Max provided and the evidence of trauma endured during military service. It worked. The Department of Defense, under growing media scrutiny and community pressure, withdrew its claim. Max was officially James's. No more threats, no more seizures. James's health, however, was another matter. The headaches grew worse. Some days he couldn't stand. Others he forgot simple words or found his hand trembling mid-sentence. He finally told Sarah. In her kitchen over coffee, neither of them touched. She didn't cry, but her silence cut deeper. "You have to fight," she said. "For Max, for Billy, for yourself." "I will," James replied, "but not for time, for dignity." He began preparing, quietly, a will, arrangements, contingency plans. Andrea helped with the paperwork. Sarah talked to Billy's family about long-term care for Max, but James wasn't done living. Not yet. Max continued his therapy work with Billy. Together, they visited schools' veterans centers. Max became more than a survivor. He became a symbol. People came from towns over to meet him, not just because he was a war dog, but because he had been broken and healed, because he had learned to trust again. On a quiet September morning, James sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, Max resting at his feet. The air smelled of dry leaves and wood smoke. "You were never a weapon," he whispered. "You were always a protector." Max looked up, eyes soft, and stayed beside him. Winter came slowly that year. James's body weakened, but his spirit deepened. Every day he and Max would walk slowly now, through the frost-kissed fields behind the house. Sometimes Sarah joined. Sometimes Billy came too. Sometimes it was just man and dog breathing in silence. Max adapted to James's decline. He became his shadow, his nurse, his shield. He would gently nudge James when he stumbled, rest beside him, when the fatigue got too much, lick his hand, when the pain grew sharp behind his eyes. And James, in return, documented everything: Max's progress, Billy's milestones, the story of their shared healing. He wanted it all written, for Sarah, for the town, for whoever came next. When the end came, it came gently. James passed one cold morning in early February, seated on the porch, a blanket around his shoulders. Max was beside him, head resting on James's knee, his breath calm and steady. Neighbors found them not long after. Max didn't resist when they lifted James, but he didn't leave his side either, not until the last possible moment. At the memorial, people came from towns away, veterans, families, children who had met Max. Sarah spoke. So did Martinez, who flew in from D.C. Even Margaret Whitaker stood and read a poem. But the most powerful moment came when Billy placed a drawing on the casket, himself, Max, and James standing under a blue sky. The caption read, "My Heroes." Max lives with Billy's family, now his adoption arranged, long before James's passing. He still visits Sarah's clinic, still walks the same property line every morning, still sleeps beside Billy's bed. But sometimes on quiet nights he sits by the porch swing and stares up at the stars, waiting, remembering, guarding.